Good morning, guys. So in today's video, I'm going to be basically talking about the Western Desert Campaign. Now, I'm just going to be basically reading a Wikipedia thing. And the Western Desert Campaign, Desert War, took place in the deserts of Egypt and Libya. Libya? Let's say it. And was the main theatre in the North African campaign of the Second World War. Military operations began in June 1940 with the Italian declaration of war and the Italian invasion of Egypt. From Libya in September, Operation Compass, a 5-day British raid in December 1940, led to the destruction of the Italian 10th Army. 10 Armata. Benito Mussolini sought help from Adolf Hitler, who sent a small German force to Tripoli on the directive 22nd 11th January. The African Corps, General Lieutenant Erwin Rommel, was formerly under Italian command as Italy was the main Axis power in the Mediterranean and North Africa. So that's basically the start of it. In the spring of 1941, Rommel led Operation Sonnenblume, which pushed the Allies back to the Egypt, except for the siege of Tobruk. At the end of 1941, Axis forces were defeated in Operation Crusader and retired again to El Agheila. In early 1942, Axis forces drove the Allies back again, then captured Tobruk after the Battle of Gazala, but failed to destroy their opponents. The Axis invaded Egypt and Allies retreated to El Alamein, where the 8th Army fought 2 defensive battles, then defeated the Axis forces in the Second Battle of El Alamein in October 1942. The 8th Army drove Axis forces out of the Libya and the Tusnia, which was invaded from the west by the Allied First Army in Operation Torch. In the Tusian campaign, the remaining Axis forces surrendered to the combined Allied forces in May 1943. The Western Desert Force, renamed SICOM and later the 8th Army, was depleted in early 1941 to send units to Greece. Rather than complete the conquest of Libya, just as German troops and Italian reinforcements arrived, British Commonwealth and the Empire troops released after the conclusion of the East African Campaign were sent to Egypt, and by summer, the surviving Commonwealth troops had returned to Greece, Crete, and Syria. So that's basically it. Well, start of it. And from the end of 1941, increasing amount of equipment and personnel, including US supplies, tanks arrived from the 8th Army, 48th Army. The Axis never overcome the supply constraints, limiting the size of the land and air forces in North Africa, and the Desert War became a sideshow for Germany. When the expected quick conclusion of the Operation Barbarossa, the invasion of Soviet Union was not achieved. And that's basically, and in the belligerents, on the Axis side, obviously it's Italy, Libya, and Germany. But on the Allied side, it's the United Kingdom, India, Sudan, Southern Rhodesia, Palestine, Australia, New Zealand, Egypt, South Africa, Free France, Poland, Greece, and Czechoslovakia. Commanders and leaders. For the British commanders, there's Archibald Wavell. He was a senior officer of the British Army. He served in the Second Boer War, the Bazar Valley campaign, and World War I, during which he was wounded in the Second Battle of Ypres. He served in the Second War initially as Commander-in-Chief. Okay, and then Cloud Archwinleck. Field Marshal Sir Cloud John Auchinleck was a British Army commander during the Second World War. He was a career soldier who spent much of his military career in India, where he rose to become Commander-in-Chief in the Indian Army by early 1941. Harold Alexander. Field Marshal Harold Rupert Leo Frick George Alexander I, Earl Alexander of Tunis, was a senior British army officer, served with dissident in both the First and the Second World War, and afterwards as Governor or General of Canada, and the First Lord Lieutenant of Greater Ecosofla. Richard O'Connor, POW, was a senior British Army officer who fought in both the First and Second World Wars and commanded the Desert Force in the early wars of the Second World War. He was the field commander for Operation Compass in his forces. Alan Cunningham was a senior officer of the British Army noted for his victories over Italian forces in the East African Campaign. During the Second World War, later he served as the 7th, and the last High Commissar of Palestine. He was the younger brother of, it cuts off there. And then there's Bernard Montgomery, 1st Viscount Montgomery of Alamein, nicknamed Monty, and the Spartan General. Was a senior British officer who served in the First World War, the Irish War of Independence, and the Second World War. Now on the Axis side, Italo Balbo was an Italian fascist politician, can't even English, and Black Shirts leader who served as Italian Marshal of the Air Force, Governor General of Libya, and Commander-in-Chief of Italian North Africa. Balbo was described as the heir apparent to Italian dictator Benito Mussolini, often seen as the most probably dangerous man alive, however, blah blah. Rudolph Graziani, 1st Marquis of Neghelli, was a prominent Italian military officer in the Kingdom of Italia, Regno Esercito, primarily noted for his campaigns in Africa before and during World War II. A dedicated fascist, he was a key figure in the Italian military during the reign of Victor Emmanuel. And then Italio Garibaldi was an Italian senior officer in the Royal Army before and during the World War II. He was awarded the Knight's Cross of the Iron Cross by the German Führer Adolf Hitler for his leadership of the Italian forces in the Battle of Stalingrad. Ettore Bassetto was an Italian military officer before and during World War II, in addition to being a general of the Royal Italian Army. He was also a senator and governor. He held high commands during the Second Ethiopian War, the Spanish War, and the North African Campaign. And then, obviously, on the German side, it's Erwin Rommel. Yes, August Rommel was the German general and military theorist, popularly known as the Desert Fox. He served as a field marshal in the Wehrmacht of Nazi Germany during World War II, as well as serving in the Reichswehr of the Weimar Republic and the Army of Imperial Germany. And then Georg Stumme was general in the Wehrmacht of Nazi Germany during the Second World War, who briefly commanded the Axis forces at the beginning of the Second Battle of El Alamein, and died during defense of Outpost Snipe. He had taken part in the Battle of France. And that's basically it. And casualties and losses is for the North African Allied side is 220,000 men and 35,476 killed. Now for the Germans and the Italians, it's 620,000 wounded, I guess, casualties, and 32,342 killed. So that's like. And apparently the actual tanks that the Italians mostly used was the Italian L333 tankettes, whatever that is. And obviously the British used the cruiser tank Mark 1 A9. And that's basically describes everything, basically. That's like the first bit of it. And that's the Western Desert Campaign of North Africa. Read to you by yours truly. There is a bunch of backgrounds and terrain and stuff like that, and British and frontier skirmishes, and Operazione E, in Operation Compass, and Battle of Sidi Barrani, Battle of Baridia, Battle of Bedafon, estimate POW numbers. That's okay. And then January 1951, and there's Tobruk, of course, where I think that's where the Italians, no, the New Zealanders, or was it the Australians? One of the two defended properly, well, very strongly. And that's basically the Western Desert Campaign. Like and subscribe.